Welcome to the Travel Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Vandenberg. On our show, I interview and connect with leaders across travel, hospitality, and tourism. We talk leadership in our industry, what has shaped them, the successes, failures, and everything in between. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Dina Niekamp, Associate Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Branding at Miraval Resorts. The Travel Leader Podcast is brought to you by The Travel Leader, a leadership coaching and content company. I provide leadership coaching and workshops for individuals and teams looking to accelerate leadership performance. Learn more at www.thetravelleadercoach.com. Hello, welcome to the Travel Leader Podcast. It's so great to be here today with my guest, Dina Niekamp from Miraval Resorts. She is the Associate Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Branding. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. So nice to see you.
Yes, we met recently at the Forward Conference in Chicago. I really appreciated Dina following up with me and connecting with me after I spoke there, and really talking about this idea of thought leadership and getting our message out there about our expertise. So part of that is going to be woven in, I think, into our conversation today. But to get us started, what is the red thread throughout your travel and hospitality career?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this a lot, and at Miraval, we all isolate one word that represents us. It's our sort of guiding light. It's our way to introduce ourselves to new teammates and parties and guests that come. And it's a really hard task at hand. It really makes you think about your personal branding. So I actually had a different one that I let sunset and established a new one over time when I really got to know myself. And that word is gumption. And when I think back at my career and really my life, my entire personal life, and what made Dina tick and keep moving and want to go into hospitality, I think of gumption, which could sometimes have a negative connotation. I make it very positive, which is that it's a spirited initiative or having a sense of resourcefulness. And when you break it down and think about that, what that means to me is throughout my career, I was always asking, well, what else can I take on? Where is my path going? What do I need to do for growth? And most importantly, and the one that I think is often missed, what feedback do you have for me? And when I think about the many moves I've made and the different leaders that I've spoken to, Dina is who she is. It's tied in a professional bowl, but one thing they were always going to see was this gumption and this spirit inside me. And when I reflect on that, there are certain leaders that were quite visionary that loved it, that said, great, I know that this is how you tick. Let me be ready to answer those questions and let me be ready to share feedback with you. I do really well with that. And then there's other leaders that might find that threatening, that might find it, very millennial, like, why can't you be happy with where you are? Why do you always need to be seeking something more? And so I had to learn about myself and my leadership style, and also even at a senior level, what I'm looking for in a leader too. And inevitably the answer is someone that embraces me and is willing to have those conversations without a dedicated timeline attached to it, without promises that may or may not be kept, but just philosophically, because I think you either have that fire in yourself or you don't. But like I said, the most important part is listening to the feedback and adapting and growing. Young Dina in her career had a lot of lessons that needed to be learned, and current Dina still does. And just the willingness to, even if you don't want to hear it at the moment, to step back and reflect not only makes me a better leader, but it certainly helped sculpt my career and where I'm headed today. So gumption is the answer. That was my red thread.
Yeah, that is a great word. I don't think I've heard that word used in a long time. And something I picked up on that you started talking about, which I think is at the beginning, that's really important, is kind of the process that you went through, because you mentioned that you kind of let one idea about yourself sunset and another emerged. What do you think contributed to that process and that change?
Yeah. I think there's one really special leader, one of our GMs that uh, is all about giving space, and I think she encouraged me as sort of my peer to be able to shift and change. But I think at the core, not directly tied to Miraval, just remembering we're all human. So with that means we're going to make mistakes. We're going to have meetings where we didn't show up as our best selves. We're going to have coaching sessions with subordinates where you're like, oh, why did I say that? As soon as it came out of my mouth, I knew that. Or with leaders, and you're like, that's not what I meant to say. That's what happened. So I think just being kind to myself has served me over time. I think I also, just like every human, have been through a personal journey, a few restarts, whether that was younger, with education and wanting to change courses, down to, grade school, up through college, changing majors. And then in my personal life too, going through a divorce and finding someone new and starting a family. Like that is all, it humbles you and it makes you push harder. And I think just remembering that it's okay to make missteps in life and in leadership. And as long as you reflect on them and you're just honest about that moment, in my book, it's okay to keep moving. And I don't think I would be comfortable working for someone that didn't also accept that. And that's certainly a leadership
Yeah.
trait that I try to share to my team. Just keep moving. And I think
Hmm.
because of my personal journey, whether that's school or personal relationships or starting a family and the struggles around that, it's made me a better leader because I'm nothing but human. And I think it's opened a lot of comfortable doors for people to also be human and show their vulnerability. And these, to me, are all like very new concepts because, especially in the luxury hotel world, talking about your personal life and certainly sharing examples and vulnerable moments was not always the norm. That I think has changed over time. And I like to think that I'm part of the change makers that just give an open forum because you can't show up to work if you're not in the right headspace personally, and vice versa. And so
Yeah.
I just think this concept of leadership and vulnerability is changing and shifting for the better. And that's something over my 18 years that has probably been the last 8 years versus the first 10 years.
Yeah. So, yeah, what I'm taking away from that is that it's kind of this idea of self acceptance and
Mm-hmm.
non judgment, and realizing that as humans, we go through an evolution,
Yeah.
and we're not going to have it right the first time. And what is even right? I mean, we change based on our circumstances, and growing and developing. And it just looks like, or sounds like, you've really reflected on that. You are changing, and that's okay. And that self acceptance of who you are at your core.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah. So you mentioned that this idea of gumption, that it was also something that was recognized and appreciated by some of the best leaders that you've had. So that's one way maybe someone would describe you. Are there other ways that people around you would describe you as a leader?
Yeah. Um, I've been described as having a wicked sense of humor, which I've also realized either lands or doesn't land. So while the people that have described it being great is much appreciated, I am conscious also that I'm in a professional setting and that not everyone thinks Dina's funny. So I try to bring levity. I think that with a personal touch, a personal connection, is the best way to build a relationship. And it's also just who I am personally. I think I'm incredibly honest, obviously, with the caveat that there's certain things you can't share with everyone. There's certain confidential matters, there's certain big, high 50,000 foot concepts that not every audience is going to be. But to the best of my ability, depending on the audience, we have to be honest. We have to be direct. The concept of you can be direct. It doesn't mean you're being emotional or insincere or insecure, but you can be direct with some radical candor of, here's the situation at hand, this may affect you XYZ, or here's the business model changing. So I think just humor, honesty, and then certainly above all else, I'm constantly coming from a place of strategic thinking, big picture. My role and really what I've learned and excelled to over time is getting up at 100,000 feet, saying like, that hasn't worked in the past because the results have been XYZ. But if we shift it slightly, the results could shift. And then just really inviting my teammates or anyone else to share their ideas. I don't know it all. I don't have all the answers. You're only as great as the people you surround yourself with, and including all of my colleagues, all of my directors in our strategic vision is so important. Not to say that we always include in the end everyone's ideas. We have to find the best that are going to return the best effort and input combination. But I think this ability to bring a little levity, bring as much honesty, and just constantly be strategic thinking is the best descriptors of me as a leader.
I love the breadth of qualities there. And
Hopefully
yeah,
they're accurate.
yeah.
Hopefully no
I
one's
mean,
listening like, she doesn't do that.
yeah. Well, sometimes, it's good to check in with people
Yeah.
and see, is my self-perception the same as what people outside of me see. But yeah, humor is so important. I think our lives and work are too serious
Yeah.
often, and obviously the honesty and being direct, that's another good one. What I'm really curious about is the strategic thinking,
Yeah.
because I think we often talk about this as kind of a buzzword. And you described a little bit what it means to you. But would you be able to elaborate a little bit more, maybe on a specific example
Mm.
of how you've actually executed that strategic thinking process and
Yeah.
why it's so important in your leadership?
Yeah. So without sharing too many KPIs, one example is for Miraval, we wanted more group business, especially coming out of COVID. That is a big portion of where business is. And Miraval does it so well, whether it's a social group or a corporate group. With our mindfulness learnings, with our ability to connect humans, you can take any standard business meeting and really amplify it to something will change the company's outlook, both personally and professionally. So, one strategic shift is, as you know, in hotels, you have sales, you have marketing, you have revenue. So, I'm a big believer in an integrated sales and marketing campaign. Let's bring everybody together so we're all marching for the same goal. So, the objective is to increase group business. Let's get everyone rallied. What can we do from the marketing side? Is there a digital campaign that we can layer? Is there blogs we could write that help the consumer understand us a little bit more? Can we then coach our sellers on how to use this via social media, a tool like LinkedIn, which I know you and I both love? So we turn our sellers into marketers. We get the marketers on board with what we need to sell. And then we work hand in hand with revenue to build the proposal that is cost efficient and is truly a differentiator for the customer. So I live and die by the integrated approach and the fact that it doesn't matter who you report to, and if you're different departments, getting in a room and solidifying what is our goal, what's our objective, how are we trying to move the needle, and then starting to actually blur lines with how we get there. So instead of trying to stay siloed, let's blur, let's all morph into one plan, and let's throw all of our resources together, from our human assets and abilities and skills to our marketing investment to challenging our sellers to think differently and go away from their muscle memory with how we're selling something or what we're selling, and certainly getting the buy-in from our revenue team on how we tactically get there and make it something that's very value driven for the consumer. Because while we are for profit, what we do always want to do is show the value and constantly be showing our potential groups that this will change their business or their social relationships, and it will also change them personally. So blur the lines, get together on one plan, make sure it's measured by KPIs, and that it's going to drive revenue. That's been biggest success to date, and just one real life example of what we brought to life this year. And then at the
Yeah.
end of it, we get to share the great news and share the tactics and reuse what worked.
Yeah. Yeah. So one really big thing that there is this idea of collaboration,
Yeah,
right? So bringing everybody together. And I also like how you point out, I mean, this is sometimes it's obvious, but I think we forget is what's actually our end goal
yeah,
and how do we all align together behind the same goal? Because I think, as you've pointed out, when these different departments are working in silos, they may have their own goals and
yeah,
KPIs, but it's really about how are we rallying behind this goal together and collaboratively. And yeah, you summed it up really well with that, also that idea of blurring the lines
yeah.
between the departments.
I think too, everybody outside of their own goals, they have their own day job. There is not one person in America right now that doesn't feel overloaded and has
Hmm.
so much on their to do list. And so I was just speaking to someone about this morning. How do you rally the troops? How do you get to say, we need this goal? And by the way, this might be more than what you're doing tactically, and it might grow your to do list, but still get them behind the idea and the shift in tactic. And that can be the hardest thing because if they're not buying what you're selling, they're not going to get behind it. And for that, my main strategy is include all the key players in the building of the strategy from the start. If you build
Yeah.
a strategy and you force it on them, it's not going to be adopted as much as if they're part of the build and they get to, even though it might not be every suggestion everyone makes, they get to help sculpt that, and then it's part of them, and then they believe in it, and then they'll coach their teams to believe in it too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that idea of buy-in, getting buy-in is so critical,
Yeah.
and getting people to rise above to that level that's beyond the day to day,
Hmm.
which kind of consumes us most
Yeah.
of the time. I mean, that is that, that idea of rising above is what's so critical for
Yeah.
strategic thinking. Yeah. Thanks for elaborating. Who are you at your core beyond titles and roles you play?
It's such a good question. I'm a mom. That's really important to me. And I'm a wife. And that's been a really surprising journey for me because even though people say, like, it is so fulfilling, when done right, it fills your cup with so much joy. That has been so cool and has made me a better leader. It's made me be maybe a less available leader because my boundaries are stronger, my start times and end times are stronger, and sometimes I feel guilt no matter what, right? And so I have to throw out the guilt. That's a constant journey. So I feel guilty when I'm not there for my family or when I have to travel, and simultaneously I feel guilty. No, this is my end time because my kids only have an hour and a half before they go to sleep, and there's that crunch, and that'll change over as my little ones get older. But those titles are surprising to me in that when young Dina with all of her gumption was coming up, never took time to carve out the personal, was only so focused on the career. And even when I'm interviewing people today and I hear that reply of, and you don't have to have kids, you don't have to have a significant other. I'm not saying that, but you certainly should have some outside of work things that make you tick, that are interesting to you and that give you that white space away from work. So that's something that I've been developing over time, and probably focus a little bit more on the career than the personal at first. And now I think I've course corrected, but having that personal life is what's driving me today. Some other attributes, as I was thinking about this, is that I'm a lefty, which means so many things to those who are lefties. So I'm living in a righty world with a lefty brain.
Yeah.
And that came, being a bit ambidextrous and having to do a little bit of extra thinking and processing. And I think instead of looking at that as something that held me back, I now look at it as a gift. And I look at it as, how cool is this that I can go from tactical to creative and creative to tactical really quickly. And just understanding that shift in my brain was the work, but it changes my outlook both personally and professionally. I'm a champion of honesty, personally and professionally. Let's just be honest. What is going on and what are our goals? I I GSD, I get stuff done. I'll use the non-swear version of that. Get stuff done. So both personally and professionally, I am a taskmaster. I think it's one of my hidden skills, and that's how I get through. And it's not to say I'm perfect. I certainly am like, oh my God, that totally fell off my radar. But I found that both my home and my operation at work best when wheels are in motion. Follow up. Like, I think you're only as good as your follow up. You're only as good as if you promise to send that report, actually doing it. And if you promise to have that conversation, getting the meeting marker on the books. So those are just some of the personal attributes that sort of blend between work and career.
Yeah. Yeah, that's again a great broad description of different parts of your life, and so interesting about being a lefty. I'm married to a lefty, so
So you know what I mean? We're different.
yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what I was imagining, while you were saying that was just this idea is that you're I would think that you're also able to just see things from a different perspective. It's like where you're physically standing, and um whether you're using your dominant hand or your weaker hand or whatever, there's a way of seeing things, the world, a little bit differently than the more majority of us, I can imagine.
Yeah, I feel like lefties were tasked with having to find the workaround from a very young age. So
Yeah.
finding the workaround is just my go-to. And it
Right.
served me really well in business because a lot of times you need a workaround, just like trying to figure out how to play sports, which I was never great at, or, really how my mind was working.
Yeah. Well,
It's
and
just a little
being
extra.
like what you started with the idea around gumption,
Yeah.
being resourceful.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as a kid, if you were handed some righty scissors, you had to figure out how to make it work.
Totally. Which isn't that just like how we are to date? We're just handed some righty scissors and we're like, how are we going to fix this and make money?
Right.
That's how I kind of have to approach it all.
Yeah. Yeah. So, moving forward a little bit here, what inspires you and motivates you to create meaningful impact?
Getting the small little tidbits of feedback, and we were kind of talking about this earlier too. Just recently, I've received a gift, and I truly consider it a gift of a few pieces of feedback from people outside of my team. And so my husband's so funny. He's always like, your team is like your primary audience. So it's like, of course they're going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm like, well, hopefully they're not telling me what they want me to hear, but we built that relationship. It's easier to have a two-way communication. The gift to me is when I hear from third party, agencies that we pay for some feedback, or leaders outside of my department with feedback. And just I call it a gift because a handful of people shared some feedback, especially after a couple of key meetings we had about emotional intelligence, executive presence, how I said things, how I included people, how I wasn't insulting in the delivery, but my point got across, and how I especially lean into female empowerment and give my leaders a platform. And it's like surprising to me because I sometimes don't know my audience. I don't know if people are paying attention. I don't know if I resonate. I don't know if my humor lands. I don't know if my presentations land. And so certainly I get feedback from those immediately around me. But what has truly motivated me lately is the light bulb going off. Like, Dina, people are listening and you're making an impact in areas that you didn't even realize, and in people that are not even directly within your company. And that has been incredibly inspiring. And then I think the other thing is, and this is also recently, I had a few lunches with previous teammates because you're all busy with your J job. The world keeps spinning and you forgot 3 years went by. And so I was lucky enough to have some lunches with some old teammates and just reminiscing and hearing old stories and things that I forgot about. Like, do you remember we were closing this deal? Or do you remember we had this thought leader on site and XYZ happened? And listening to how they integrate some Dina isms even into their leadership today has been a gift, and something that I forget. I'm so focused on the day job and moving forward and the results and helping my team today that both of these examples are the light bulb going off of how I'm helping the people around me and the path that I've led. These leaders telling me, like, we still use this today. I still use this training manual, or I still use this way you explained this to me once in this one annual review. You said this sentence. The fact that somebody can remember one sentence from an annual review 8 years
Wow.
ago really floored me, and was an honor and a privilege to hear that. And my philosophy is always that great people came before me. That's how I am where I am. They gave me the gift, honesty and leadership and suggestions, and I try to pay it back and pay it forward. And just recently it's like really come to light, and it's truly filled my cup to realize that I am making a meaningful impact. Maybe I just
Yeah.
wasn't listening. That's my reflection. Maybe I haven't been listening enough, or maybe I'm finally at the point in my career where I really am making this broad impact, and it's an honor. It's very humbling.
Yeah. Well, I
Oh,
mean, sometimes we don't know unless we ask or we get that feedback. But yeah, I mean, it sounds so much like you're making a connection with people and it's resonating with them. And that's coming back to you down the road, which is wonderful to hear.
yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
How do you empower others? You referred to this idea of female empowerment. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And I certainly don't feel like I can only empower females. I think because of the place I am at in my life and my experience, I'm able to offer some real life examples of how my leaders have treated me. I mean, the leaders I've had at Hyatt have treated me with nothing but kindness and care when it came to two pretty quick maternity leaves. And, also allowing me to say, but no, I still want a career and I still want to keep pushing. And that combination to me was refreshing and surprising, and something I'm so grateful for. We are going to give you space to have a family and recover as needed and get that family kind of kicked off, is how I think of it, and never lose a step with finding you a path forward. I think that's incredible. I think it's rare. And so in cases like that, whether it's someone going through a divorce or someone going through maternity leave or someone just feeling like there still is a glass ceiling that exists, which is certainly a common feeling, I have a lot to offer wise. But also, you don't have to be a female. I've had male teammates that have gone through a parenthood journey of their own that look a little different, that they needed some compassion and empathy around and consistently do. So it's not specific to females, but I tend to lean into the path that I've been down. And so I feel like I have a lot of tools. But non-personally, from the business side, how I'm trying to empower people is walking a fine line between being here as a strategic director and communicating the 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 foot view, depending on who I'm talking to, and depending on how much of that they gather, without micromanaging, without allowing. I want to give them space. I want to give them the strategy, discuss the high level tactics, but then give them the space to run with it and develop it. Nobody, especially on my team or in this industry, is here as an order taker. They also pride themselves in being visionaries and incredibly intelligent, and they are. And I'm so just grateful for them. So I really try to share the why. That has been
Mm,
a lesson that I've had to learn over time. Nobody wants to just blindly accept anything, so especially anymore. They want to know the why. Why are we doing this? And when I stop to explain the why, and then I explain the goal or the big picture strategy, and then I invite them to build in the path and the journey, the roadmap on how we're going to get there together. Not to say we're not going to go left or right, and not to say at one of our one-on-ones, I'm not going to say that idea is not going to work, and let's talk about why, or I invite you to think of a new idea. But it's a combination of educating, explaining the why, but then giving them enough autonomy to bring it to
mm,
life, because we're paying for some really amazing, intelligent talent. And certainly they don't want to be micromanaged. They want the ability to spread their own wings. I also just try to empower them by thinking about young Dina and Gumption and what I would want to hear, like always in our reviews are, where do you want to go? How can I help get you there? Never, I'm going to get you there in 12 months or 2 months. Never a promise on time, because it is a journey and there's many business factors that come into play. But where do you want to go? What skill set is holding you back from getting there? And let's focus on filling in the puzzle pieces in the holes. What resources can I get you? What education can I get you? What exposure or conversations or additional one-on-ones outside of me to get you where you want to go? But I'm not afraid about talking about the future. I'm just not promising exactly when that can be, because we don't know yet today. We're making these roadmaps based on the business of tomorrow. So giving them
Yeah.
space and autonomy, but trying to stay in the director's seat as well of where we're going from a business perspective, because that's what we're measured on.
Yeah, I mean, there are three really big things that are so critical to sum up. I mean, you gave a synopsis that was already so clear, but just those three things that I heard:
Yeah.
sharing the why, giving autonomy, and putting yourself in their shoes, and providing the resources and tools to support them in that, in getting to the why is great. And I love those things you mentioned, because they so much relate to actually the presentation I gave at Forward about
Yeah.
transformational leadership. All three of those things are huge, so I appreciate you giving those examples here as a great textbook example. It's awesome. So what
I mean, I'm proud of so many things. I'm so proud of the personal life and the family that I've built, and the ability with many things in my life. There's always people that have questioned my actions, that have said, do you really know what you're doing? Do you know where you're going? And it has just been a gift of the lovely husband and the amazing family I have. So at my age, something that I really questioned at times, would happen, how it would happen. So I'm certainly proud of that. I'm proud that I'm the breadwinner, that I'm the provider and the mother. I think it's incredible. And I think that really the gift that both my husband and I are giving our children today, it's a very personal choice, but it's a gift to them that he can spend full time with them, nurturing and growing them. And I see the results of it every day with how great they're developing, and how much he works with them. But I'm also proud of my career, and I think it's okay to say that. I'm really proud that in 18 years, I literally went from a sales coordinator, not knowing how to dress in a luxury hotel and even what a luxury hotel looked like and felt like, and to leading an entire division, opening our first global property, working with teammates throughout Hyatt on their development. And so it's tough, because I keep toggling back and forth in my mind and in my spirit of, should I be proud of one more than the other? But what they both reflect is a lot of hard work, a lot of restarting, and a lot of self-reflection. And I think that when young people are coming up and they say, I want to be a vice president, I can do your job. Certainly, but you have to do it and be willing to listen and adapt and grow. I have a lot of people that I want to change my personal life. I want to take the step, whatever that journey is. And it's daunting. It's scary. It's really scary. And so anybody can do it. I don't say that I'm proud of my career and my family, because I have false illusions. I'm proud of how hard I worked to get here in both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you knew what you wanted and you
Mhm.
went after it, and you also accepted that it wasn't gonna look perfect and pretty on the way.
Yeah. And it didn't, because
Yeah,
I was using right-handed scissors the whole time.
right. Yeah. No, and I think it's so important that you brought up both the professional and personal, because oftentimes when we talk about leadership, we tend to leave out the
Mhm.
personal side of things, and they are not compartmentalized areas of our lives. They interflow and contribute to one another. So I'm glad that you brought that into the conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you.
When have you underestimated yourself?
Probably constantly. I think it's so natural for humans to underestimate themselves or to make false stories one way or the other, either overestimate or underestimate. The inner dialogue, probably with any big presentation I have to give or career shift or, asking for the next thing, you have both insecurities and maybe like overconfidence. And so I don't have a particular time, only to say probably every single big element I both under and overestimate myself. And so I have developed my own tools to try to bring it back to middle, because if you're walking into a big presentation or a big ask or a big coaching moment with a teammate that is not going to go great, if you psych yourself up too much, it could go the wrong way. And if you underestimate yourself too much, it could go the wrong way. So I try to just be ready for the middle of the road and to go left or right. Whether that's if it's a big presentation and it's a subject matter that I don't know, like the back of my hand, get to know it like the back of your hand, prepare, even down to giving practice presentations to your significant other or in the shower, whatever you need to do, whatever makes it work, make sure you know the information. Trust also your intuition. And I had one incredible leader a few jobs ago that really helped develop my intuition. And I remember him telling me at the time, well, like, that's your area of opportunity, and me not even being able to comprehend what he meant by that. And him literally, even though I was far along in my career, saying, that hair on the back of your neck, that's your intuition. And so you need to listen to it. You need to find it and listen to it. And really spent about 5 years of really amazing investment in leadership with me to get me to the next level, the highest level that I could be, which led to the job I am in today, to listen to your intuition and gut. And then my other sort of secret skill is either you have developed your small talk skills, presentation or openers, your empathy triggers, or you haven't. So if you have them developed and you can meet anyone and shake their head and do a 5-minute back and forth of how are you, what's new, how are you feeling, how's your family, or kick off a presentation of here's why we're here today and give a succinct delivery. If you haven't yet developed those skills, that should be an area where you should focus in, because you should be able to be any elevator, any boardroom, or now I'm learning any playground social setting where your kids are, and be able to make small talk, be able to succinctly say, here's why we're here today and here's our goals. And so those have been my top 3 tools, because the inner monologue will always say, I'm underestimating myself or I'm overestimating myself. And neither one of those has served me well. Being prepared for down the middle and any which way a conversation can go served me really well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're talking so much about how you present yourself, how you speak it to groups, whether it's a formal presentation
Mm-hmm.
or even just an informal business engagements. And that is so key to being a
Mm-hmm.
leader and being seen as a leader.
Yeah.
And that is often an area where we do underestimate ourselves, but you're right. We can overestimate ourselves as well if we think we have more competence than we actually do. Yeah, so a lot of self-reflection involved in that too.
Yeah.
And really, really gauging, okay, where do I need to dial up or dial down in these specific situations?
Yeah. And above else, if I don't know the material, if I don't know the data, then I'm going to fall. And so
Hmm.
there's definitely been moments where I've underestimated myself because I didn't understand the matter at hand. And the only tip there is do your homework,
Yeah.
understand it, figure out through the way that you learn and the way you comprehend things, how to understand it. And a lot of times I've leaned on other decision makers and partners or leaders to say, I'm coming to you hat in hand. I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me and make it simple? And like the
Yeah.
gracious people will do that. And if they won't, then that's not a trusted ally either.
Yeah. Well, and it's one thing to like understand something for yourself, but then when you're presenting and you need to explain it to someone else,
Right.
you have to know it 5 times better.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like studying for a college exam. You need
Mhm.
to know it inside and out before you're
Yeah.
tested.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
Yeah. What leadership skill do you most rely on to lead people and teams?
It's so I think one of the reasons that at Forward I signed up for your session is because I do like to think of myself as a transformational leader, and working with an executive coach and really defining leadership skills. That's my go-to, but said in non sort of MBA terms, empathy mixed with humanity mixed intelligence. We're dealing with people at the end of the day. Even if the data says one thing, we're dealing with people. And to be a leader, you're in the people business. No matter if you're a lawyer, you're in hotels, you're a nurse, no matter what you are, you're dealing with humans. And even though robots are slowly coming in, while we are still one-on-one with each other, a human, approach it with empathy. The
Yeah.
person that's sitting across from you might have something going on in their mind, their body, their soul. And if you don't know the core of it, and I actually am recalling a story that you shared at Forward about a teammate that just was going through a lot personally. And once you uncovered that and peeled the onion, the business side came. And so that to me, and it doesn't have to take your whole 1 hour catch up. It can take 5 to 15 minutes, but that is time well spent. That is not
Yeah.
taking away from the business side. Now, don't get me wrong, there are 30-minute meetings, and we all book each other back to back in this post-pandemic world without, bio breaks and all of that. So there are certain meetings that you're like, okay, I love you, but we got to get to business.
Right.
Like, we got to solve XYZ. But then balance those with the time where you can just chat. You can just say, like, how
Yeah.
are you? How's your family? How's your health? Like, how's it going? Not in a or asking too much information, but knowing that they have a safe platform to be human is my go-to leadership skill.
Yeah.
You just got to connect with people.
Yeah. People first and
Yeah.
creating that warmth and connection for sure.
Yeah.
So we're about to round up today, but before we do, what vision would you pursue if you had everything you needed to succeed right now?
Lifting my team up with me. I know it may sound a bit cliche, but you are only as good as the people around you. I've spent an incredible amount of time with the people around me, both my leaders as well as my, director team. And I want the best for all of them. So in a perfect world, if I had every resource and every opportunity, they would all be lifting and growing with me. And that's certainly what I fight for to grow. Not to say that there aren't moments through every mentorship relationship where you have to address things head on or you need a certain behavior to shift. But success to me means equally lifting up those around me. It's not just Dina's journey. And that's something that's maybe changed over time. It used to be Dina's journey, and now it's the pack that makes me as strong as I can be. And it's about all of our journey. And that to me is a beautiful thing. When I fight for my teammates to grow and lift up and it works and it sticks, that fills my cup. That's success to me.
Yeah. Well, those are very wise words to end with today and I'm sure that you are lifting up your team already. Now it's not a futuristic thing based on our conversation.
Thank you.
So very inspiring. It's been wonderful having you today. Is there anything else you would like to leave with our audience today?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for having me and also equally give you a huge shout out because our relationship started by you being a very open speaker that invited personal connection from a very large audience. And when I did reach out to you, sort of cold called, cold emailed, reached out, you immediately carved out time and you, without knowing me, invested in my end. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about today is people like you. So I just wanted
Oh,
to thank you for making space for a perfect stranger. And it's honestly been my pleasure getting to know you and just thank you for lifting us all up.
oh, thank you, Dina. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Well, thank you again for joining me. It's been a wonderful conversation. Until next time, I'm Rachel Vandenberg, and this is the Travel Leader Podcast.